Alrighty, time for your daily dose of news whiplash. Remember what I said yesterday about how Gazprom had declared force majeure over Nord Stream 1, and that they weren't going to be able to reopen the pipeline, and they wanted to get out of their contractual obligations to deliver natural gas to Germany, and how this was pretty much going to turn Europe into a Mad Max environment where people were out of fuel. And it was chaos in the streets, and the energy markets all across the West were going to necessarily skyrocket because, they were going. Energy markets are global, and if all of a sudden Germany loses its source of gas coming from Russia, it's going to buy it from other countries, and blah blah blah. All that's out the window now, apparently. Crisis averted. It's all over. Gazprom apparently is saying, oops, or never mind, the pipeline will be back up and running this Thursday, 2 days from now. So I don't know what to believe anymore. I really don't. But one thing is clear. Europe's source of gas, coming from Russia, it's on its way out. They might have it this week. They might have it next week. They might have it next month. But will they have it next year? Will they have it the year after that? I think the answer is no. The Ruskies are making a lot of moves east. They're making deals with China, with Iran, with India, to sell their fuel to friendlier countries. Countries that don't want to break Russia up into 12 different countries, which I learned from the Duran this morning. Alexander Christoforou did a story featuring this conference in the Czech Republic, where scholars are going to be discussing how, once we get rid of Putin, we can just get rid of Russia entirely. That basically Putin is the only thing holding, Russia together. And if we can get rid of him, then we can just completely destroy Russia, dismantle it, and turn it into 12 little countries that will be easier to colonize, befriend. And so the Ruskies know what time it is. They know that the West wants them dead, that they want to literally wipe Russia off the map. And so they're not going to depend on the Europeans for their revenue forever. However, in the short term, I do understand why the Ruskies would want to extract as much revenue out of Europe as possible. Gas prices are higher than they've been in a long time, and at a time of elevated prices, as a commodities producer, you want to cash in on that. You want to build up your reserves, and that's exactly what the Ruskies have been doing. They're enjoying record profits. So I do understand why they would want the pipeline back up and running. Please excuse that horn. If you could hear it, there is traffic outside of where I'm recording. Believe it or not, I do not have a high-tech soundproof studio. Anyway, as I was saying, the Ruskies not too long ago were working with the Germans, who once upon a time were at least friendly with Russia, to develop Nord Stream 2. And that was only scrapped fairly recently. They were going to introduce a whole nother pipeline to send even more gas than before to Germany. So is it a stretch that they would keep the old Nord Stream 1 open? Well, yeah, Nord Stream 1's been around for a long time. It supplies a lot of gas to Germany. And at a time like this, the Ruskies are making a lot of money off of them. And of course, the Germans, they'd have to be crazy, which I think they are, in order to let the Ruskies stop. In order to say to them, you know what, now you can keep your gas. But they've just about done that. They've come as close as you can. They're not begging the Russians to stay. They're not begging them to keep sending them their gas, even though they desperately need it, because they're shutting down all their nuclear power plants. They've already shut down all their coal, or most of their coal plants. They don't let people in Germany, they shut down all the coal mines. It's not like Germany can't power itself. It's not like Germany doesn't have enough energy. It's not like Russia, actually holds a stranglehold over the European economy. Far from it. They could buy coal from Poland if they wanted to. They could mine their own coal, although I believe the coal in Poland is of a higher quality than Germany's. Germany's coal is notoriously impure and burns dirtier, not as hot, because it's not as pure carbon. But nevertheless, I am a big advocate of coal. I think it's wonderful. It's if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's cheap. It's abundant. It's hot. It does everything that you need. But these folks don't want to use it. They don't want to use nuclear power either. Nuclear power is pretty darn effective. But not everyone wants a nuclear power plant in their backyard, and I understand that. If you have a densely populated country, maybe you don't want a bunch of nuclear reactors, right next to major population centers. Even if the risk is quite low to those people, I understand the why people would be uncomfortable with that. But again, that's why coal is so wonderful. It's energy dense, it's inexpensive, it's everywhere. It stores very well. You don't have to do anything to it. You just have to kind of keep it dry. But it's lumps of coal. You just throw it in a pile or in a silo or anywhere. And then you just build a fire, boil some water, it spins a turbine, and voila, you have electricity. You could even power your electric car if you wanted. In fact, that's where we get most of the energy to power these Teslas and other electric cars. Coal's also good for heating your home. You got a wood-burning stove, could just as easily throw coal in there. It'll burn longer, burn hotter. It's better than wood. It's more energy dense. And so Europe has alternatives. They don't need Russian gas if they really want to get off of it. But they don't. These people are utopians. They're insane. They live in a fairy tale where they can have no coal, no nuclear, and no Russian gas. I guess they want to live off of American gas, which, the Americans don't want to explore for more gas. We don't want to get gas out of the ground. And yet we're supposed to, produce enough gas to send over to Europe on ships of all things. Can you think how ridiculous that is? You fill up ships with gas, liquefied gas, and then you run those ships all the way to Europe to where those ships can be unloaded and put into European pipelines. Why wouldn't you want to just have a pipeline running along the ground, all these places in Europe? Why would you want to transport it by boat? It's so much less efficient. That's a big advantage that gas has over something like coal. Coal, you have to move by train or ship or boat or ship or truck or train. You can't run it through a pipeline like you can with gas. So I think it's safe to say that these policies are not driven by a logic of any kind. Because it's not like they have there is logic to it, but I disagree with their logic. There is no consistent logic here. The only principle that I can derive from their actions is that they hate regular people and want to impoverish them. That is the only consistent thread amongst all the actions of Western leaders, whether they be in America, the UK, Germany, Brussels. They're all just doing whatever they can to make cost of living as high as possible, to make energy as scarce as possible, to make food as scarce as possible. They're already starving people in Sri Lanka, Haiti, and God knows where else. Remember that our fertilizer is derived largely from natural gas. That is how we artificially, fixate nitrogen to make nitrogen fertilizer. You also need phosphorus and potassium. The potassium is something that a lot of people don't talk about, but that also comes from not Russia, but Belarus, which is subject to all the same sanctions as Russia. They are a huge producer of potash, from what I understand. And so this affects not just energy, but also food. Yes, energy affects food in terms of transportation of food and running tractors and things, but this is going to affect crop yields. Because now we in America are going to have to ship our fertilizer all the way over to Europe, or they're going to have to synthesize fertilizer from our natural gas and our phosphorus and our potassium, our phosphate, which we here in Florida, big producer of phosphate. Eventually, I think this will all come to a head, at least in the United States. Europe, I don't think there's enough willpower left amongst the peoples of Europe. Maybe some of them, like Hungary, but it's very sparse. The will to live in Europe. I think that we'll probably just end up with higher suicide rates. That'll probably be the net effect of these policies in Europe. But in the United States, I think it will lead to greater divisions, and it could be eventually something that leads to the eventual breakup of the United States, which is something that I've been confident is going to come at some point over some issue for years now. And it's not that I'm predicting, like, oh, it's going to come this year, it's going to be this issue. The next election, we're going to split up. No, nothing like that. It's just that we have irreconcilable differences. People don't, there's not enough, there is no cohesion in this country. The United States is a vestigial organ. It's like your appendix. It has no purpose anymore. The United States was created to further the common interests of the several states, but all 50 states no longer share common interests. There are certain states that share interests in common with other states, but there are very few interests that all states share in common. And it's clear that the federal government, in many ways, is antagonistic to the interests of at least one major interest of almost every state in the country. And people don't even really understand that issue with the structure of our government, and so there are no efforts being made to remedy it. So eventually we will have an issue that is just so divisive that it completely undermines whatever credibility the federal government has left. And I think impoverishing us all by, outlawing energy could be it. I could very easily see, a pro-energy union of American states that, of course, would include energy-rich places like, West Virginia, with all of its coal mines that the federal government has been trying to put out of business. The division of the union could lead to a coal renaissance because this new union would be created largely to embrace cheap energy. It would see a boom in oil exploration in places like Alaska. Energy in this union would be cheap. In the, lefty, anti-energy green union, energy would be absurdly expensive. People would not have running water or reliable electricity. They may not have consistent electricity at all. The grid could break down entirely. And of course, there would be no more, internal combustion engine cars. They would just be left with unreliable and expensive electric cars, or, which of course it would be very difficult to charge since electricity will be so scarce. You'll probably be more interested in running the air conditioning or the heat, although I guess the heat would be gas powered. But how do you do that? Maybe they'll come up with solar electric heaters. I mean, who knows? I mean, it's such a disaster what they're trying to accomplish that I'm confident that at least, like a place where I live, people are not going to go along with it. My state's not, a lot of your red states are not. West Virginia certainly is not. Hell, I mean, look at the red states. We have the oil out in the Gulf. We've got the coal in West Virginia. We've got the oil in Alaska. I don't know if there's any oil left in Texas. Probably. You never hear about oil in Texas. I know there's a lot of oil in New Mexico. Maybe western Pennsylvania. If Pennsylvania, keeps trending, in a reasonable direction, that's a big, western Pennsylvania is big for oil. If the Greens in America don't want all this energy, the rest of us would be happy to take it. We'll take all the energy-producing parts of the country, and the Greens can have Chinese-made solar panels and wind turbines. They can starve and freeze along with their European compatriots. Because if we don't dissolve along those lines, if Greens really were able to do to America what they're trying to do to Europe, or what they've done to Sri Lanka, we will end up like Sri Lanka. You will see mobs breaking down the gates of the White House. They will go in and pillage all the government buildings. They will force, our government to flee. And, that's chaotic and messy. I'd rather it not come to that. I'd rather we just, throw off the yoke of the federal government a little more gracefully. And just say, you know what, no, your rules don't apply to us anymore. Because we are on a collision course. It's going to come at some point, whether it's guns, whether it's, maybe it'll be abortion for the blue states. Maybe the blue states will say, you know what, no, we're just going to secede over abortion. But that won't happen unless the federal government's not outlawing abortion nationwide. So I don't think that would be an issue. Or it would be an issue, I don't think it would be the issue. There, of course, will be disputes over elections. As elections become more heated and people are more passionate about them, there will be more accusations of cheating, whether they're correct or not. To the point where, frankly, I would be shocked if the European Union makes it past 2030, and I wouldn't be shocked, but I would still be quite surprised if the United States makes it past 2030 intact. Because these goals are going to tear apart the unity that these political unions, what little unity they still have. The EU being, much more vulnerable than the United States. But the EU is, of course, much more monolithic. There is a much more entrenched establishment in the European Union and, the various states. But anyway, I guess that's all I have to say on this matter for today. If you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and subscribing. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.